Welcome back, everyone. So we're now going to start in a slightly new series in exploring the Dharma Jewel. So we can have the first slide, please. We'll have the title of the series that we'll be exploring over the next 5 weeks. So it's called the 4 Mind Turnings. So these are 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara. Okay, and then we have the next slide. So these 4 mind turnings are the foundation practice for all the Tibetan schools. The first stage of the 7-fold mind training, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also the outer preliminary practice of the Tantric and Dzogchen traditions. Okay, thank you. So over the last couple of months or so, we've been exploring the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So in a way, they're the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path are a foundation of, if you like, early Buddhism. They go back to the Buddha's original teachings, and they're emphasized in the Theravadan tradition, or sometimes the kind of Southeast Asian schools of Buddhism that's practiced in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, and so on. So we're moving our emphasis really and moving forward in time, maybe 1500 years, to more of an area around Tibet. So we have Tibet, we have northern Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, Ladakh, up to Mongolia. So we're going to kind of look at some of the foundation practices in a totally different geographical location. So it may just give a slightly different take on the Dharma. So as we just saw on the previous slide, they're the 4 mind-turning reflections, which I'll tell you actually what they are shortly, are the foundation of what is called the 7-point mind training. Some of you have come across this, sometimes in Tibetan it's called a lojang. So these were some teachings brought to Tibet by Atisha, who was an Indian monk, maybe from West Bengal, and he spent many years studying with a teacher called Dharmalinka in Sumatra, and he was studying some teachings that are referred to as mind training. It's like, how does the mind become detached from samsara, and how do we kind of work on a very kind of practical level? So these were later. So Atisha was invited to Tibet later in his life, and his teachings established are used by most of what are called the later schools in Tibetan history, if you like. I don't want to go too much into that because we're not talking quite about Tibetan history. So Atisha brought these mind training teachings to Tibet, so nearly 1,000 years ago. The 7-fold mind training, I know quite a lot of order members have been inspired by their practice with these. There's a number of slogans, I think there's 51 from memory, over 7 different areas or topics, and they're quite practical. They're kind of, I think originally they're probably easy to remember, 51 slogans, he says. I can remember them. But they're very practical and really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of spiritual life, you know, how to deal with difficulties. It's said Atisha had heard the Tibetans were very amenable and friendly people, so he had a young companion who was generally quite, I suppose, obnoxious, and would keep arguing with Atisha and so on. And because the mind training teachings look at one of the things is, an enemy is your best teacher. He brought his companion along. Later Tibetan teachers commented he needn't have bothered. So I think a bit of a Tibetan joke there. So the foundation of these mind training teachings are, the first line is practice the preliminaries, practice the foundations. And the foundations of the whole mind training tradition are these 4 reflections that turn the mind away from samsara. It's the start of the spiritual life. We find the same beginning in the Tibetan Tantric or Vajrayana schools and of Dzogchen, which is connected with that. The foundation is these 4 reflections. So if you like, these 4 reflections that we'll look at in a moment would be familiar to all people around the Tibetan plateau, like I say, Mongolia, Ladakh, Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal. In some ways, as we've been brought up, quite a lot of us in the West, with Christianity, at least as a background, and there'll be certain aspects of Christianity and the Old Testament that we're familiar with. We'll probably all know the 10 Commandments. We'll know the story of the Good Samaritan, and so on. So it's that kind of level. It's the base of all the other teachings. They just have a very slightly different feel to the Noble Eightfold Path. So let's have a look at what these 4 reflections are. So the 4 mind terms. So the preciousness of a human life, the insubstantial nature of life and the certainty of death, karma and its consequences, and the defects of samsara. I don't want to say too much at this stage, because over the following 4 weeks, other people are going to be looking at each one of these in turn. So I have to resist the temptation in this introduction to, if you like, get the key points and then spoil everyone else's talk. Maybe that would also be a reflection for them on the defects of samsara, but I won't do that. So just a few introductory remarks. So the preciousness of a human life. So we're born human as opposed to animal. We're probably familiar that there's other realms, according to the Buddhist tradition, we can be born in. So the preciousness of the human life reflections just kind of show us the advantages of being human and that we can practice. We then have the insubstantial nature of life and the certainty of death. So yeah, we know, particularly with the pandemic that's been going on over the last year, 18 months, that life is insubstantial, and we will die. It's a question of, if you like, when we're going to die and of what. But death itself is a certainty. And a lot of you will know, in Buddhism, we don't shy away from that. If you like, that mirror of death gives our life meaning. Yeah, and I think that that's important. I'm just reminded as I'm speaking, sometimes people will think that's a bit morbid. I remember years ago reading, I think it was Stephen Covey, who was one of those kind of American self-help gurus. And he said, you need to look at what you want on your epitaph to know what's important for you. So it provides that mirror. We then have karma and its consequences. So we all hopefully have some familiarity with the practice of ethics. So that reflection goes into quite a lot of detail of the workings of karma and consequences. And then lastly, we have the defects of samsara. In a way, that's the three lakshanas, that samsara, conditioned existence, is impermanent, insubstantial, and unsatisfactory. No doubt when we get to that week, we'll be going into some of those defects in more detail. So we'll move on to the next slide. So these four themes, I think, explore the heart of Buddhism. So the first one looks at the 6 realms of rebirth, and explores those different realms, which we can either see as existing realms or as, if you like, state of mind, and why the human realm is the best place to practice. So I think we start to realize that we have a precious opportunity. So we'll be looking at that. Impermanence is the core of Buddhism. It's, if you had to sum up Buddhism in one word, I think we'd either say impermanence or conditionality. In a way, they're the same thing. Because things are conditioned, they're constantly changing, impermanent. So it's really looking at the truth of impermanence. And out of that, we can see that things change. And we can either be scared that things change, or we can see that as an opportunity. So I've already talked a bit about the workings of karma and ethical practice. It's the foundation of the threefold way. Certainly lists in Buddhism, isn't there? Ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Again, it's one of those foundations of the past. In terms of the threefold way, if we're not ethical, we can't have deeper experience of meditation. And without those deeper experience of meditation, that clarity of mind that ethical practice brings, then we're not going to be able to develop wisdom. And then looking at samsara. It's partly looking at the first noble truth, that conditioned existence is unsatisfactory, and exploring that. But also, we talk about samsara and we talk about nirvana, but when we do the fourth mind turning, we really start to think, why do we want to free ourselves from samsara? I think we all want to be free from suffering to a certain extent, and we want to be happy. That's, a natural human kind of want and desire, which is absolutely fine. But we're going much further than that. There's the whole of samsara, and some parts of samsara can be very pleasurable, but we want to free ourselves from that. So we really need to understand why we want to free ourselves from samsara. So these 4 mind turnings lay the foundation for our Buddhist practice. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to read something. So this is from a Tibetan text called the Mortality Prayer. It's a number of pages long. So I'm just going to read something from the end, last page really, which I think sums up the mind turnings. Even though I have been roaming through cyclic existence without tiring of it, and was constantly suffering, still I was not alarmed. Still, the mind is not becoming detached from samsara. You who have lived a pointlessly wasting this life, I feel compassion for those who think and act as if life were permanent. Empower me with a realization of mortality. I have neglected to practice the virtuous commitments. I have squandered this rare human birth on distractions, yet still true understanding has not been born within me. I feel compassion for those who have lived an aimless and idle life. Empower me with an inner realization of mortality. Self-numbing is the main cause of these thoughts. Wholesome deeds which should form the foundation for liberation are lost due to conditioning. You have still not made a deep mental decision to take the spiritual path. I feel compassion for those of you who are dwelling in samsara. Empower me with an inner realization of mortality. From now on, empower me with an awareness of death. Empower me with an awareness of the futility of samsaric deeds. Empower me with an awareness of all that is illusory. So that gives you a little bit of a taste. And there's a couple of lines there which, whenever I read it, really strike me. Well, a couple of sections, like it's saying, I've neglected to practice virtue and have squandered my life on distractions, and yet true understanding has not been born within me. It's almost like saying, what do you expect? You haven't, if I don't practice ethics, if I allow myself to be distracted, then I'm not going to develop a sense of wisdom. In a way, how could it be otherwise? But the way it describes it is almost like a big exclamation mark. Been doing this, and wisdom hasn't arisen, understanding hasn't arisen. So I kind of quite like that. It's just like, it's a reminder. It's like, yeah, actually, I need to practice. I need to do the ethics. I need to train my mind. And the other one that always strikes me is you have still not made a deep mental decision to take the spiritual path. And that always feels a challenge. It's like, have I made that deep mental decision? And then I need to look at my behavior. I need to look at how I'm spending my time. If I've made a deep mental decision to take the spiritual path, then that has implications on how I'm practicing, how much time I'm spending, maybe meditating, maybe speaking to spiritual friends, maybe studying the Dharma, reflecting on my ethical practice, putting effort into my ethical practice. So whenever I read that, it's really quite challenging. And sometimes I kind of think, yes, I have made that decision. And other times I think, no, I don't think I have actually. Just been distracted. What have I been doing? Why have I been wasting all this time? So if we have the last slide for questions. I think the 4 mind turnings, the reflections, for me anyway, can have the following effect, that it motivates me, or it can motivate us to practice Buddhism. It reminds us what we're moving away from, that we can't find lasting satisfaction within samsara. It also adds a sense of urgency to our practice. It's like, yes, we know we're going to die, but actually we don't know when. We have this view that we're going to live to our 10, or maybe 10, the way we're living longer. And it's always going to, we're going to get to that time. We sometimes think, or I think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. Oh, I'll book a retreat up for later in the year, and so on. I'm always putting things off. And actually, I think these reflections give us that sense of urgency, that we have this opportunity to practice. And we need to take that opportunity now, because it may be too late. And I think overall, for me, over the years, because I keep coming back to these 4 reflections every now and again, and I think they can provide a foundation for our daily practice. It takes a few minutes to reflect in the morning of these four and just think, yes, I do need to practice, and I do need to practice today. So hopefully over the next few weeks, we can explore these and you'll have the same effect on you.